Welcome to Operations and Supply Chain University. I'm Jerry Wright. In lesson number 4, we're going to talk more about A3, DMAIC, and LAMDA. LAMDA is a new concept. So what is LAMDA? LAMDA is look, ask, model, discuss, and then act. So the key thing with LAMDA is we want to go to the Gemba. Gemba is a Japanese word that means the actual place. For our purposes, it's where the process is occurring or where things are happening. So we go and see. We need to see for ourselves firsthand information of what's happening. We need to talk to the experts and say, hey, why and who? So we want to get a good idea of what's going on firsthand. Then we want to model to fill knowledge gaps and uncover the true root cause. Then we have discussions regarding look, ask, and model to discuss what are the root cause and what countermeasures would we like to consider using. And then finally, there's the act or the implementation and follow-up checklists. Now, LAMDA is similar to PDCA. If you remember PDCA, or you've not heard of it before, it's plan, do, check, and act. The challenge that I've discovered and others like me have found is that people do very little planning. There's a lot of doing, looking at stuff, very little checking, and then immediate establishment of what the change is going to be or the countermeasure. So it's not as rigorous as it could be. Now, if you're doing Toyota Kata, which we'll typically cover in the Greenbelt area, there's a much more rigorous use of PDCA using the Toyota Kata. And I think if you do PDCA that way, that's very effective. But for the rest of us who are not involved in doing Toyota Kata as yet, LAMDA is a really good way to create a cycle of knowledge creation. So again, like PDCA, we want to make sure we get out and talk, to the experts and stakeholders, visit the Gemba, and then we don't want to start doing until we really understand the root cause. Otherwise, we may just be addressing symptoms. So now LAMDA, which for our purposes is important, is very similar to DMAIC, define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. It's a very similar kind of concept. Now we want to make sure we quickly get to the Gemba and observe things firsthand and gather expert input. Now here's the image that's been used. This was put out by the Lean Product and Process Development Exchange, LPPDE. Again, they say the same thing. It's kind of like this little cycle. You can see here, it's look, ask, model, discuss, and then act. That's how we create knowledge. Now, here's a quick example I want to share with you. This is from a company that I worked at. You can see here in this particular example where they were working on problem solving, they looked, took pictures, got the information, they asked the experts, they got the people involved. They modeled, here's what it looks like from a diagram and perspective. They discussed what they found and what they learned, and then they acted. This LAMDA process was put in place after weeks of failed efforts of people just quickly trying different solutions went into place and didn't work. So this LAMDA was very effective and it got to the root cause and solved the problem for good. Now, in A3, DMAIC, and LAMDA, we want to make sure we understand how they all work together. Okay, so we understand A3 from the previous lesson. We now know what LAMDA is. Of course, we have to practice with it. Let's see how they work with DMAIC. Now, keep in mind that DMAIC came from Six Sigma back in the 1980s, mid-1980s, early 1990s. But it's really the same approach we follow with Kaizen and with Lean and Lean Six Sigma projects. It's really the same process. We often don't think of it as deliberately, but we're going to do so for our class because it's just a good model or an approach to problem solving or to drive continuous improvement. So typically we start with a problem. It's normal. Then we're going to go to LAMDA. We're going to look, ask, model, discuss, and then act. That's how we're going to get to the root cause. We're going to create knowledge. Now, here's how we're going to do it. We have this nice format. So let's dig into A3, DMAIC, and LAMDA. So your A3 form, this is it. It's in your Lean Six Sigma Yellow Belt Toolkit. We start off with A3 title. What are we talking about? What's up there? So again, first section 1, define. This is something you complete with your mentor, leader, or coach. Why are we talking about this particular subject? What's the reason? And you write it down. Okay, great. Then what are the current conditions? Now, this is where you have to go to the Gemba. Remember, that's the actual place where the process is happening, where things are going on. And we're going to do LAM, look, ask, and then we're going to model. The model could be drawing a flowchart. It could be a number of different ways that you model what's going on. Maybe you do a flowchart of the process, you take some pictures, whatever it is, but we want to look, ask, and model to get the current conditions. Now, through the measures, sometimes we don't know what measures we're worried about. Maybe it's just output, maybe it's yield, maybe it's scrap, maybe it's efficiency. Depends on what you're looking for. This is something you do with your mentor, coach, or leader, and we figure out what measures we're going to look at. Now, I have basic concepts, basic measures in there that are pretty common. Lead time, WIP, or work in process, process steps or touches, distance traveled or space, 7S, standard work. You could also have number of forms or emails used. Just depends on what you want to measure. So you figure out what those targets are, where you're at today. Before you do anything, don't change anything. Measure the current state and understand it. Then once you understand the current state, we've done our look, ask, and model. Now we're going to discuss what we see. What are the potential root causes? What are the diagrams? What have they told us? Have we done a fishbone diagram? Have we done a process map? Have we done time studies? You need to figure out what that is. And if you notice, analyze then carries over to the second half of this form. By the way, A3 owner at the top there, that's probably you, but maybe it's someone else you're working with. That's who owns this and is going to take it forward. And then the date or dates can go up there. So after we've analyzed and we think we have a pretty good countermeasure and we've discussed it, then we say, okay, let's implement. What is our plan to reach the future state? So similar to PDCA or to CATA, we actually have to try what we're suggesting. Will our countermeasures work? We're not sure. We have to try them. So we're going to do our trial. We're going to do a pilot, whatever it may be, and then we're going to see what we learn. Based on what we learned, then we can decide to act. If we have a pretty good handle, we think we've got to the root cause, we're going to move down to the action plan and say, what are the key things we have to do to act or implement this improvement or implement this particular change that's going to solve our problem? So that's where the first part of improve and act comes in. Finally, at the end, we want to control. Why do we want to control? Because if we don't set up controls or measures or training or whatever it is, we could go back into the same problem again, and we don't want to have that. We want to have good standard problem approaches. So we think about what could go wrong, and then how can we ensure that the process stays in place and works effectively. So that's that final control. That's the act. It's the act in PDCA, it's the act in Lambda, and it's the control in DMAIC. So if you notice, as I've gone through this, we're defining, measuring, analyzing, improving, and controlling, and they're blended together nicely. It works very well together. Now, if you really like this Lambda process, the cycle of knowledge creation approach, I'd suggest you get this book by Alan Ward and Durward Sobek II. They started this lean and product process development with the LPPDE. Great information. Strongly recommend this if you really want to get into lean product and process development. There's a second edition. I think there's even a further version of this, but again, this would be a great one to look into if you want to understand Lambda and the cycle of knowledge creation to a greater degree. That's it for this lesson. Thank you.